Good morning. My name is Linda Smith. I'm on the Summer Forum Committee, and I want to welcome you all here in person and there online to our service today. Before I introduce our speaker, we have a chalice lighting.
Good morning. I should have checked how to use this lighter. It's very fancy. Whew. We light this flame to remind us love is center. As we grow and connect, mature and deepen, love remains the center. When the light of truth burns all else away, love remains.
Thank you, Kristen. Today we're here to talk about social media, keeping our teens safe. The presentation will be by Michael Higgins. Michael is the behavioral health supervisor at the University of Utah Hospital, where he works with youth and their parents. He holds an LCSW and an MSW, is a behavioral therapist, and has provided therapy through an online platform and at residential treatment centers. Join me in welcoming Michael.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that introduction, Linda. I am here for a few reasons. I'm very excited and passionate to share this information with you all, and I'm hopeful that you'll take some tools that you can use in your own life as with your family and friends. Number two, it's a very important topic. We've just seen a really big increase in social media use within our teens and within our culture. And number three, the main thing I'm here is because really my mom set me up for it. And as the founder of psychology, Sigmund Freud would say, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. And so thank you for having me present on this really important topic. So first we're going to talk a little bit about what social media is. And a big part of the data that is where I'm pulling this from is from the Surgeon General's 2023 report on social media, which came out last year in May. I'm hopeful again that you can set some guideline with your kiddos and family, and maybe even for yourself, and how to make a plan for yourself and loved ones. So the interesting thing about this from a psychological standpoint is that the economy that we're talking about is the attention economy. So, there's only a certain amount of time in the day, and all of these platforms and other types of media are really begging for every minute. So it's a big battle mentally of where you want to spend your time and what's really important to you. And sometimes when we slow down and we have a chance to kind of dissect some of this information, we can see what really matters to you and how much you want to spend on social media or how much you think is important. Also, it's not all that bad as well. I do want to share some of the positive things that we have seen with social media. So what is social media? A lot of people, the quick way to sort of, I should probably also thank Dr. Kristen Francis, because she presented to our University of Utah team, and I had a dream about her last night that she was in the audience, and she was came up and helped me, and I don't think she's here, but I do want to shout out because I'm using a lot of her information as well. So if it has a messaging function, that is what social media really is. And so we might think that, obviously Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those things are the ones we think of, but in the past few months, Spotify, which is a music app, has introduced comment sections similar to YouTube. And as we know with comment sections, if they're not monitored, they can be really notorious, be dicey in regards to content unless someone's really watching it. So things that you think of that might not be social media could also be it. So if it has a messaging function, that's sort of what we're talking about. But if you were to Google what is social media, it's websites and applications that enable users to create and share content and participate in that. So the Surgeon General's report, this is our Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He came out with this, and the big overall umbrella was that social media use by youth is nearly universal, so up to 95%, which we really don't see those types of numbers in studies. ages 13 to 17 report using a social media platform, and more than a third of that saying that they use it almost constantly. And although age 13 is commonly the required minimum age used by social media platforms in the US, nearly 40%, which I would argue is probably higher, are being used by ages 8 to 12. So there are some things that are in place for these social media apps in regards to age, but there's lots of ways around those, and it's not monitored too well. So why is it more important for our kids? We're going to be talking a little bit about 10 to 19. And the reason is as you probably all know, it's a time when it's a highly sensitive period for regarding brain development. So we'll talk a little bit about the stages of development in the next slide, but we'll see why that is. Our risk-taking behavior are at their peak when they're in their younger ages, as well as the well-being of experience at the greatest fluctuation. So it's a lot of black and white. As you've talked to kids or probably been around kids, everything is either awesome or everything sucks. That's usually what we see. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, and one of the things that make them great is that their brains are developing, and so they say crazy things that are cute that you would never even think of, but they could also, like recently my 9-year-old thought that there was a news story about the SEAL team, the Army SEAL team came on, and he thought that they were SEALs, like amphibian SEALs that were going out that worked for the government. Because his brain's developing, he's thinking outside the box. And that can also be greatly influenced as we are looking at social media too. What we see can have a greater effect on us and greater fluctuations. We're also seeing in this time where we're seeing mental health challenges such as depression typically emerge around these times. And most importantly, identities and self-worth are forming during these ages. And when we look at the pressures that we see with Instagram and Facebook and things like that, that could be really damaging. So it hits harder, I guess, is the overall idea behind this than it would be for older adults. Okay. So this is kind of some Psychology 101, Erikson's stages of development. I'm sorry if you can't really read this, but what Erikson did was looked at the different stages and the things that we had to have a conflict on, and if it was a positive outcome or a negative outcome, that's usually where we saw some struggles when it came to mental health. So our very first one is trust versus mistrust as a baby. If you have somebody that takes care of you, you have trust in the world around you and hope for the future. But as we go down, we're looking at about 6 to 12, 12 to 20, and we're looking at sense of competency if things are going really well, and also a sense of self and uniqueness. If these things are not met and we have a negative outcome, a sense of inferiority could come and identity confusion. And that's what we're seeing a lot in my practice. It's just not knowing who you are. I mean, we all have that sometimes. Life changes, not knowing, who am I type of thing. That's a universal question we have, but it's really, really strong around these certain ages. So that's the Erikson stages of development. There's a picture of Erik Erikson. That's him. He died in 1994, and that is when Pulp Fiction came out. So I just want to throw that in there to kind of keep you engaged. That was the year that movie came out. And that's when Erik Erikson died. So changes in developing brain. So the amygdala is really changing a lot. This is part of our brain that looks at emotional learning and behavior. It's a bit of a fight or flight. It keeps us safe, but it also has this anxiety level to our amygdala. So that part is really growing. So also with our prefrontal cortex. So impulse control, emotional regulation, moderating social behaviors. We have a technique in therapy called DBT, which stands for dialectic behavioral therapy, and it's kind of universally used for teens. And what it really is a lot of acronyms, like we think of a stop sign, and the S stands for stop, and the T stands for think, and the O stands for observe, and the P stands for planning. All seems very, very logical and something you probably already do subconsciously. But for kiddos, it really is an aha moment sometimes of like just slowing down, stopping, and not being as impulsive. So we also see increased sensitivity to social rewards and punishments. So those like buttons, when you see the thumbs up, those really hit powerful. They really define a lot of their self-worth on how many likes they have, which they have no control over, right? And that can be a problem. And youth may experience a heightened emotional sensitivity to the interactive nature of social media. When I was growing up, this presentation is called "What Our Parents Didn't Tell Us," and then our parents didn't have to deal with this. This is kind of a newer phenomenon. So a lot of parents now have to become experts because this is so prevalent. And the interactive nature of social media is, once something is online, you can't really get off of that. Whereas when I was a kid, you'd have maybe an interaction that wasn't great, but after it was done, it was kind of done, and it didn't live forever online. So that can really develop. It can really affect the developing brain. When we have seen studies with functional MRIs, we can actually see changes in the brain using that. And this is more in regards to the addiction and gambling side of social media. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, okay. So one of the main things I'd like to take for you, I have three main things. One is social media use is predictive, and it is predicting a decrease in life satisfaction for females ages 11 to 13 and males 14 to 15. Like the reports and studies, it's really, really easy to see that this is predictive of that. And 3 is the magic number, so especially more than 3 hours a day using that is the one we have to watch out for. So if you take something away from this presentation, hopefully it's that number 3, because again, there might be some young people listening to this, and I don't mean it to be like all bad about social media, because it's not all bad, but it's moderation, and it's knowing what your relationship is towards these things. Usage can make you depressed. So this is part of a JAMA article that came out in Psychology magazine, and it's not part of the Surgeon General's, but it did show that U.S. adolescents, this was a large study of over 6,000 kids from 12 to 15, they adjusted for baseline mental health status, which is unique for a lot of studies, and they found that adolescents who spent more than 3 hours per day on social media doubled the risk of experiencing poor mental health outcomes, including symptoms of depression and anxiety. So again, just trying to nail home the fact that 3 hours is really the thing. When social media was coming out, I don't know if you could see, it was around, if you could see, it's 2004 is when Facebook, 2005 and 6 is when Twitter sort of became more prevalent. The Surgeon General report referred to a study of social media sites being rolled out, and there was a huge increase of over 300,000 new cases of depression in colleges that we saw. So almost like a COVID-type outbreak, just through the roof with increase in depression and anxiety. That's usually the ones we see. If you're already depressed and anxious, you can experience lower self-worth, body image, poor sleep, low self-esteem. The body image and self-esteem really is effective towards Instagram and the social comparison that we see in my practice. So survey says bad. It's a PowerPoint joke. Is the opposite true? Unusage. I don't know if that's a word, but you can try it in your next Scrabble game. Unusage can help your depression. Just because we take something away doesn't always mean that we're going to see the opposite. However, it is true. Limiting the use of social media have resulted in benefits that we have seen with young adults and adults. Yeah. Using 30 minutes daily over 3 weeks, or limiting it saw significant improvements of over 35%. And the thing that really blows a lot of my colleagues' minds away is just deactivating some of the social media can improve well-being by 1/4 to 1/2 the effects of therapy. So a big part of my practice is looking at, for my young kids, is looking at their social media accounts, how much time they're spending on it, and trying to decrease that a little bit. Because a hard truth is that antidepressants don't really work great in youth. Their brains are developing, and it's kind of a hard time for that. So what we're looking for is prevention and trying to set different patterns. Because if they're not, knowledge gives us agency, and if we don't know these things, it's hard to monitor them. So how much is really happening? So 8th to 10th graders in this study showed that average spend is about 3.5 hours. So we are over, just our average is over that magic 3 number. And we're also seeing 1 in 4 spending about 5 hours a day, and 1 in 7 about 7 hours per day, which is really hard to fathom because when we talk about the attention economy, there's only so many hours in the day, right? But what we're seeing in my practice is kids are staying up really late, or they're waking up, they're on their phones during school, or they're doing all of these other things where they might want to be focusing on somewhere else and just don't have the ability to. And we're also just talking about social media, these 3.5 hours, 5 hours a day, that's just social media. That's not just regular screen time. So in my house, we have a lot of rules. But one is, when they're done with maybe a YouTube video, they'll want to watch a show with me or something like that as a family. And so that's not just screen time. This is just focusing on that social media. So that's a lot. Main point number 2, social media can harm you. I have big discussions with this, and my 12-year-old, he does not believe me, but you can see it depicts harmful acts. It can inform youth about lethal ways of dying. 2/3 of adolescents are often or sometimes exposed to hate-based content, unintentionally sometimes, and females of color are especially targeted. So what we see with this, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is very predictive that this can harm you. It also is a time when people are putting out vulnerability, trying to connect with others and share things, and these can be taken advantage of and they can be manipulated. So we're seeing nearly 6 in 10 adolescent girls reporting that they've been contacted by strangers on social media platforms in ways that make them feel uncomfortable. And again, trans youth and females are especially targeted. When we're looking at the Erickson stages of development, this is times when you're trying to figure out who you are and you're putting yourself to be vulnerable, and sexual predators can really take advantage of that. And it's done in secrecy a lot of the times because sometimes we're not monitoring these things as parents, or we don't know. We are also talking about disordered eating. I'm just going to check my time. Okay. Disordered eating and body satisfaction. So the social comparison, one of the sayings we have in therapy is comparison is the thief of joy. And that's a lot of what Instagram and Twitter has on here. You're seeing people's highlight reels, and that could be really hard to compare yourself to, especially if you're feeling a little bit down. So perpetuate body dissatisfaction, disorder eating behaviors, social comparison, low self-esteem, especially among adolescent girls. We see an increase in that when it comes to their social media use. And then the significant relationship between social media use and body image concerns, eating disorders, again, goes to that social comparison as a contributing factor. So when asked about the impact of social media on the body image, 46% of adolescents ages 13 to 17, this is men and women, said social media makes them feel worse. So, when a lot of the times with my patients that I'm working with, we're showing them how real versus fake images are. When you see a magazine, a lot of us know that there's airbrushing and things like that happening. But for a lot of kids, they don't know that thing, or they don't know the severity that they can do. So for example, I will show them a picture like this, and I'll say which one is the real one, or which one is not. And the fun fact about this one is that they're both fake. So that's what we're dealing with now, is that there's artificial intelligence that are creating people that are not real. And our kiddos don't really know the difference between that. So it's getting really hard to figure out what's real and what's not. And that can go back into the social comparison. How can we compare something to ourselves when it's not even real, right? So I had a recent headshot done, and for for presenting, I knew I was going to do this presentation. I just asked the photographer, maybe they could change the background, maybe some lighting, and some different things to make myself look a little bit better. Because there's a lot of Instagram users that are showing this is what real is, and this is what I look like when I'm not like this. And so I wanted to share what mine would look like as well. So I had 2 pictures taken, like 10 seconds apart. And this was the first one, and then the second one came out really good. It was just just some slight changes, and same person. It's hard to tell, but you really make yourself look different. So Utah statistics, why are we talking about this? We are number one in some things that we don't want to be number one in, unfortunately. 9% of people will experience a eating disorder in our state, which is about 1 in 10. Suicide is the leading cause of death with our kids in ages 10 to 17. And the reason behind that is firearms. So usually in most states, that's second. First is accidents and things like that. Ours is firearms. And so one thing I wanted to share is that if you have people that maybe your kids are going to go over to their house, or when I have patients come up, I used to ask, do you have firearms in the house? And a lot of times that put people on defense, and it didn't really start a nice conversation. Now the thing to ask, or the way I found out, is you say, are firearms secured at home? It's just a little bit of a nicer way to come up. And usually people will say yes, or they'll say we don't have firearms. Either way, it gets your information in a little bit softer way. So are firearms secured at home? You probably assume that a lot of people in Utah have firearms, and so going straight to that can sometimes be a little more effective. 33% of our population in Utah last year had symptoms of depression and anxiety, and 20% of adolescents reported symptoms of depression. That's above average regarding other states. We should also note that Utah is one of the younger states, so we have a lot of kids, and so our numbers are a little skewed that way, but still pretty high. And then 17% of youth reported seriously considering suicide. And so we have a lot of great things. One tricky thing with cell phones and social media and suicide is that I have a lot of parents that will say they're on their phone too much, and I'm just going to take it away from them. And when we see impulsivity in regards to suicide and access, that could be a really big trigger, because the phone actually represents their friends and their outlets and their safety. And when that's taken away, it can increase that impulsivity to maybe try to hurt themselves. And also, with the University of Utah, we have Safe UT apps, and we're always telling people, if you're feeling unsafe, call somebody, and that's really their only way. So even though the intention of the parent is to keep them safe, it could be putting them in a little bit of danger as well. So it's really finding that balance of making sure kids feel safe, and also not just taking something away without adding something. That's usually what my goal is if you're going to take the phone away, then you got to do something with them together. And that's hard, because usually they're taking it away because there's a conflict. And so the parent really has to sort of step up and help, even when they are being yelled at and maybe not being treated correctly. So that's Utah statistics. Main point number 3, this is the last one of my main points, is social media can be addicting. Researchers believe that social media exposure can overstimulate the reward center of our brain, so the dopamine, and it can trigger pathways comparable to addiction. I worked a lot in different addiction treatment centers, and usually what our goal was is to find the relationship towards the subject. So, when we look at addiction, we see heroin addiction, and then we also see shopping addiction, and they are quite different, but they all have sort of a little bit of the same pattern in regards to the way our brain works. So it's when we can start figuring out what our relationship is towards it. Why am I looking at my phone? We might have had it with, you might experience it yourself. Like sometimes I'll be looking at my phone and why am I looking at what my brother-in-law made for dinner 2 weeks ago? Like, I don't know what I'm doing, because it's my relationship is that I just, at this time of day, every day I have on my phone and this is where I'm doing. So slowing down and finding out what's priority, what's my relationship towards this, is this the best for what my needs are, can sometimes help us direct us to what might be better. And then people frequent and problematic social media use can experience changes in brain structures. This is similar to the functional MRI studies that we've been seeing, where it can really increase. We see this pattern of addiction when it comes to it, which would explain some of those 7+ hours a day, right? Because it is an addiction. The way that these algorithms work is by using random intermittent rewards. So it starts as a dopamine and then turns to an OCD type thing, but without conclusion. So the So OCD is a very serious mental health issue, and what we usually see, or when you think of it, it's people washing their hands and they do it like 5 to 10 times or something like that, and then there's a completion to it. I feel like, okay, I've done that. When it comes to this, it never has a completion. It just, we have an infinite scroll, and until something kind of either shakes us out of it, you can kind of be stuck. You might have times where you've looked at your phone like, I can't believe I was on my phone for that long, or where did the time go? And they do these sort of random intermittent awards by showing something pretty emotionally intense, like, assassination attempt or something, and then you're on your phone, you're looking, oh my gosh, and then you'll start seeing a picture of puppies or something. Like, it's just these random sort of things that are happening that can get you hooked, and that dopamine is released, but there's no conclusion, so the consistency continues to happen. So scrolling and then something emotionally intense happens. The reason I have a picture of a dog here is if you were to like zoom out and see this outside of humans, what it would look like is a dog trying to find a bone and finding bones and continuing to dig. It would be very obvious to see, oh my gosh, something's wrong with that dog. But it's hard to see when we're in it and we're experiencing it, because these algorithms are very kind of tricky and we're not very mindful sometimes. And next thing you know, you're kind of feeling a little more hooked. We definitely see it within our kiddos. So I know there's a lot of words on here, but I just wanted to share a couple of the case examples that I've seen with some of the kids I've worked with. I had a 14-year-old that was spending about 4 to 5 hours a day, stating that they weren't feeling great. They were actually seeing it physically manifest by feeling dizzy or sick after consecutive weeks of late-night scrolling. When this happened, they could usually stop for a few days, but eventually would return to it. TikTok was mostly the time, but also Instagram and Twitter were the harder ones for this person to address. He felt that social media has affected his ability to concentrate in class, and did not plan to get rid of any of his applications. Just felt very kind of clueless on what to do. And then a 16-year-old female was struggling with Instagram algorithm. That infinite scroll has just constantly fed videos and content she enjoyed and would keep her entertained for hours. It also made it difficult for her to close the app, and she reported that it was kind of scary because you begin to neglect your other priorities, and minutes can turn into hours very quickly, which we see with addiction. She likens social media to drugs. She was very aware, but it's in disguise of an entertainment. So it makes it really tricky. We also see vastly different videos. That was just kind of what I was talking about. Through her TikTok, there's a For You page, and she's shown a tearful video about a dog passing away and then someone cracking a joke. And it's just this sort of not enough downtime between videos to fully process what's happened. So you're getting these really emotional kind of things back to back to back. I worked with a lot of police officers, and they have what's called compounding Trump PTSD, because they go from a really bad accident to another bad accident, and they don't have time in between to kind of process, well, that was a bad one. This is on that level, not to the extent or to the extreme, but it is on this level of not having time to slow down and process, because it's constantly feeding you. So what I usually do when I'm working with kiddos is I think of David Sedaris. I thought this crowd would probably know who David Sedaris is. So when in doubt, what would David do? He did an interview recently, and he really prides himself on how less screen time he has. And he shared that he doesn't have his phone on him usually. And the last time he looked, he had 1.5 minutes of screen time, and he was hoping to cut that in half. So imagine what David Sedaris would do and follow his lead. As always, that's what I'm always doing in therapy. Perfect. So I just have a quick 3-minute video that just to kind of bookend. I know we've talked a lot about the Surgeon General, and when this came out, this is when the Surgeon General report came out, and they did a quick little NBC News piece on it. That's about 3 minutes. That kind of sums up a lot of the things, and then we'll go from there.
For decades, there's been that Surgeon General's warning on packs of cigarettes. But this morning, for the first time, a new warning about something else, social media and what it means for kids' mental health. Why now for this advisory?
We're issuing this advisory to sound the alarm.
Surgeon General Vivek Murthy says there's not enough evidence to show social media platforms are safe enough for kids and teens.
We see rates of depression and anxiety and suicide and loneliness going up among young people. And I'm concerned that social media is an important driver of that youth mental health crisis. This is the defining public health issue of our time, youth mental health.
Research shows 95% of teens are on social media. More than a third say they're on constantly. And teens spend an average of 3.5 hours each day on these kinds of apps, something research shows can double the risk of experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety.
The other day, my daughter came up to my wife and I and asked us if she could post a picture on social media.
How old is she?
My daughter is 5 years old. She's actually in preschool, but she's been hearing about this from her friends.
All of the big platforms require users to be at least 13 years old to create accounts, but nearly 40% of kids ages 8 to 12 say they've used social media too. Tech expert Max Stossel sees it in the conversations he's had in the past 6 years with more than 100,000 students, parents, and teachers.
When I started doing this work, I was getting the question, is 16 too young to give my kid a smartphone? Now I'm getting the question, is like third grade too young to give my kid a smartphone?
Stossel recommends 14, but ultimately the right age may be different for different families. You are almost certain to get pushback from tech companies who say they're trying to protect kids. They have age limits in place.
I appreciate that the technology companies have taken some steps to try to keep kids safe, but it hasn't been nearly enough.
The Surgeon General thinks Congress can and should do more to regulate social media companies, the same way safety standards are in place for car seats, for example. And at home, the advisory recommends creating a family media plan together, implementing tech-free zones like at mealtimes, and partnering with other parents with similar philosophies for support.
What's at stake here is our kids and their future, plain and simple.
Here's the thing. The Surgeon General's advisory acknowledges there are good things about teens being on social media, the ability to connect, to have friendships, to find support. We've reached out to the big social media platforms on this, waiting to hear back, but many of them have put some safety precautions in place. Meta, for example, prompts teens to take breaks and has a family center and guides to help people use the platform. It really is a debate for each family. If you're wondering, okay, what is the Surgeon General doing? He tells me that he and his wife plan to wait until their kids are out of middle school to get on those apps. Savannah.
It really is the issue of our time. We think about the Surgeon General and the warning about smoking in the 80s. And this, there's a thread here about a great public health issue that the Surgeon General is weighing in on that we all need to pay attention to. Hallie, thank you.
I know that was a lot there, but and it sort of summarizes some of the things we've talked about. But it is not all that bad. I know there might be some people online, and I know we have young people here going, "Hey, this isn't all that bad. There are some good things." So I do want to kind of end with, we are seeing that people who are especially marginalized, like youth, racial, ethnically, sexual, and gender minorities, they can find really strong connections with online platforms. We also see a lot of support for LGBTQ and enabling peer connection, as they were talking about in the video. There's race-affirming parts of the platforms. There's not race-affirming platforms, but there are some like Facebook groups and things like that are really positive. And we also see a lot of social connectedness among underrepresented youth. So the statistics behind that is 58% feel more accepted online, have people on there that can support them through tough times. Again, that's sort of that, taking the phone away can take away that support. Having a place to show their creative side, 71% connected to what's going on in their friends' lives, 80%, and it's a conduit for finding mental health. Like I practice a lot of telehealth therapy, and they're on their phone to do that part of therapy, which is hopefully a good thing when we're practicing. But it is part of the same thing that they are using that can also cause these sort of problems. So again, it's that balance and trying to find the way to stay safe while using these things. One of the best ways is to use a family media plan. So deciding how much hours, when it's okay, hours during the day, and how much hours, what time to turn it off, things like that. Talking about which sites are allowed, knowing, the internet safety screen-free zones. We did this at our house where we had a basket where we put our phones, and for the first week we just hung out at the basket because we were just all on our phones. But as more time passed, we put it in there and we can kind of leave it, because if it's right attached to you, it's just again hard to push it away. We also want to model it as parents or as family members. If they see you on your phone all the time, it's hard to hold a boundary to say you shouldn't be on your phone all the time. There's also router technology apps as well. You can block certain sites. We had a while where we blocked YouTube, which actually was kind of a pain because I use YouTube a lot to figure out how to do things, and I would have to go and unblock it, and it was. But when our kids were little, or one of our kids I put him on a show for Peppa Pig, and I thought it was fine. But then the next video that came out was something like Peppa Pig, but it had different voices, and he was using the animations, but it actually had like some really negative sort of horrible aspects of it that they were using, I think, as a way to be funny, but it was very inappropriate for a young person. So I thought even, these things that we think are safe and having the best intentions can sometimes create a algorithm that shows other things that we don't want. So that's why we decided to ban YouTube at our house. And then also just knowing political engagement as the Surgeon General, Congress can do more. There is a recent bill that was passed called the COSA, which stands for Kids Online Safety Act. This bill was passed in the Senate with a 91-3 vote, which is pretty amazing that there was that much bipartisanship in this day and age. It's not perfect, but it does have some progress. It does have some good progress. It's a good step. It'll help parents to protect their children while not restricting a lot of the other freedoms that other people want. But age verification, that's really a big part of this, and that was implemented. Will there be ways around it? For sure. But the more arrows we can have in our quiver when it comes to decreasing some of this use or giving us a little bit of ammo when it comes to keeping our kids safe, this is a step in the right direction. So it sets out requirements to protect minors. It also has covered platforms or applications and services connected to the internet that are, a lot of these tech companies are using, they're not getting permission from them to use this, to use their, they're on this sort of race to the bottom in regards to trying to get attention from anybody. And if it's a young kid, I don't mean to demonize them or anything, but I don't think they really realize how damaging it is. And they always go back to like what the video said, where they're trying their best, but I also don't think they see the real life damage that's happening, or they minimize it. So this will help mitigate some of that, hopefully, and there'll probably be more to come. So this book, The Anxious Generation, that came out recently, is a great book that has a lot of some of the things that we talked about, and also some tools too that we talked a little bit about as well, to help balance things out when it comes to how our brains are being rewired, or how our kids' brains are being rewired with social media and apps and online things. And then there's also some ones that I've used for little kids, like Bad Kitty Gets a Phone and Me, Myself, and I. And they're just like nice ways to bring up these sort of things in our in our day-to-day conversations. Sometimes they don't, kids don't really want to hear from their parents or anything like that when it comes to this, but if it's done where in a book, and sometimes it can hit a different level there. So that is my presentation, and I'm open to questions. Yeah, please. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. We want you to take a seat, and we're going to take the collection.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will.
And then we'll have questions and answers. Thank you. Obviously, Michael's used to giving lectures at places where they don't collect money right after the lecture.
Yeah.
But that's what we do here in church. Now it's time for questions and answers. And if you raise your hand, I'll bring you a mic, and you can talk into the mic. Okay, we've got 3 questions.
Are you going to put your presentation on YouTube, please?
Yeah, I know.
I have many, many siblings and nieces and nephews who need this.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put. It is kind of funny that I use YouTube videos in a thing that's kind of anti-YouTube because there are some really good things. But yeah, I'd be happy to put that on.
And a quick anecdote. My Q&A was that.
Yes.
The anecdote is, I'll try to keep it really short, but it's so sweet. And you talked about modeling. I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah.
As a single mom, was a single mom. Neighbor 12 or 13, I'm not sure of that particular moment, but very precocious little girl, the single mom, and an older brother who's autistic, who she cares for often. Anyway, I see them walking up and down the street a lot, and sometimes, latchkey kids come home and can't find the key or whatever, so I'm the one who lets them in. And it's an honor, but anyway, one day the little girl was very agitated, and I said, let's talk, come back in the patio, let's sit down and just talk to me, what's happening? And she reads to me, my point is texting is can be a form of bullying, of course.
100%.
And we all know this as a concept, but she felt the need to read this whole dialogue that just got meaner and meaner and meaner with two other girls. And at that age, I, for one, remember that sort of stuff, but it was not, as you say, forever out there. And she's reading this to me and getting very agitated. And I said, okay, are you open to my thoughts or suggestions about how I reacted myself to social media? And I'm, a grown-up. I think that's maybe why you wanted to talk to me. And she said, yeah. And I said, what I do is freeze my brain for a second. And then I say, do I feel they're just being mean or I being manipulated? The M&M, just speaking of anagrams. Yeah. And she said, oh, yeah, totally. Of course, she said that.
Right.
And I said, then turn the sucker off. That's what I do. Just turn it off, walk away, put it under your bed mattress for a whole day, and see how you feel, or take a walk. And to this day, she thanks me. So that's my not so humble brag.
Yeah, that's very nice. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Just real quickly, even though it's social media, all these sessions are on slcuu.org YouTube. So give it about a week or so, and Tristan will have it up there as are all the summer forum sessions. Okay. Even though I don't want you to get addicted to it.
All right, I'll only watch it once. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is regarding people who are lurkers. Are they impacted to the extent that the commenters, the participants, are impacted?
Yeah, can you say that again? Workers?
Lurkers, people who don't comment, people who just look at it but don't interact with it.
Oh, yeah. The Surgeon General report doesn't really mention too much about lurkers. It is mostly about people who are engaging, but I think that engagement level, if you're just looking at it, can increase some of those things. But no, you bring up a good point. People, like when we see the like button, when we see that hit, that's going to, from a functional MRI standard, that's going to change your brain a little bit, because now I'm basing my self-worth on a like button, and if I don't get those likes, I've seen that a lot. So people who are lurking might not be hitting the like button or posting, which does put a little barrier of, between the two.
But you don't know of any research?
No research specifically on lurkers. That would be good, though.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Observation and a question. Observation is demographics.
Yeah.
National average for this country is about 39 to 40. Mm-hmm. Utah is the youngest state. Last year, 32.1. Okay. My question is about how to deal in social media with the problem repetition of lies.
Lies.
Repetition of lies that outnumber documented facts. And I used as a case study this year's presidential campaign.
Yeah. Oh, was that a question or was that a...
Observation and a question. What do we do? What's the problem when you're dealing with the repetition of blatant lies using social media as a vehicle?
I mean, that is a great question. I don't know. That could be like a group therapy question that we could all talk about. But I mean, it is really onto, platforms. I'm sure you've seen news. They're trying to have less misinformation on these platforms, but obviously it's rampant and they're not doing enough. So it could be something where we try to hold them a little more accountable, and maybe that's on a political standard or area. But from a personal standpoint, it's a little bit of what you were saying of like putting it away, knowing if this is triggering me, if this is what can I control. That's a lot of what we talk about in our therapy sessions of what's important to me and what can I control. Even though you have a lot of anger and passion towards it, it just might not be manifesting in a way that's helpful for you, if that makes sense.
I think we're asking a question to the wrong expert. This is a social worker. We need a journalist professor for how do we deal with bad journalism. We have another question.
Yeah.
Hi, yeah. So I'm not on social media, but my dad is, and he's 71. I notice he gets really emotionally distressed when he sees things that are controversial or maybe they're not, for him. And I think we get shown repeatedly things that are controversial because it,
Dopamine.
fans the flames of the social media. So my question for you is, how do we emotionally regulate and practice good practices of, distress tolerance when we do see something distressing on social media?
Yeah, so are you asking, just to make sure I hear what you're saying and answer your question, is this for you to take to your dad and how I can address it with him, or is it more about him, what he can do?
So it's just about what each of us can do when we see distressing things on social media, and are there techniques that we can use to calm down and stay regulated?
Yeah, perfect question. So what I would probably recommend is kind of like that dialectic behavioral therapy. So it's these sort of acronyms of slowing down and stopping, being mindful. A big part of therapy is just being mindful. Is this where I want to send my attention? Because we get in automatic mode all the time in our day-to-day lives, and especially on social media. And just being aware that I know that this is happening, like that knowledge gives us agency, knowing that this might not be true, or this might just be something to keep me hooked. Just knowing that can sometimes be enough to pull a ripcord and go, I'm just gonna put this away for a little while. Because what we see is that unusage can decrease depressive symptoms. So just throw it into a river kind of an idea. I'm taking a break for a while, can help decrease some of that thing. And then just self-care, deep breaths, all those things that you can do to calm yourself that way.
Okay, now I have 5 people in this room that want to ask a question, and I know who you are, so you don't need to keep waving, but we're going to take one online. And then up here next, over here next, 1, 2, 3. Okay, Tristan.
Right. This question comes from Tammy on Zoom. She says, as a teen in the early aughts, my online engagement involved private groups and special interest groups and text-based interactions. This seems pretty different from social media like Instagram, but it also, I think, would fall into the same definition. So do we need various categories for properly researching social media, in your view? Is there research separating out engagement in these various types of platforms and mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question, and absolutely, there's definitely a difference between Instagram and kind of a Facebook group that's about LGBTQ in Utah, right? Like those are really different. So it's finding the things that work for you and your experience that you want online. But yeah, I know I'm talking a lot about just sort of in generals with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and things like that, that repetitive. But there's some wonderful things about being online and staying connected with your groups. And that's not represented in the Surgeon General's report that I brought a lot of this information from. They're looking at more of the overall view of things.
Second row here.
I don't talk with kids very much, but when I do, and I ask them what they're doing on their computer, and they invariably say, I'm playing games.
Yeah.
And they may be playing games. I guess what I wonder is, are there sections of this usage on a computer which you exclude from your data because they're not really negative or They may, in fact, even be positive, I guess.
Yeah, both positive and negative when it comes to online gaming. The thing that you have to watch out for are just those people that you don't really know who they are. So if it's like similar to the last question, if it's a friend group and everyone kind of knows each other and they're playing online, that could be really positive and it can really create strong connections. And that is the way that kids are connecting these days. They're talking to each other and playing a video game. But if you have people coming in that we don't really know who they are, that could be a little difficult. So, and it's hard to monitor that, right? You could get a friend request and you bring someone into a video game, but they might say something that you don't agree with, or not agree with, but they might say something that is inappropriate for a younger person because they don't know, or I don't know, many reasons why. But that is different than what Surgeon General is talking about, but it is a big part. It's also where we see a lot of online bullying happening as well, is sometimes over those video games when it's someone from the outside that we don't really know. That could be mean to them, or frustrated because of a video game. Yeah. Good questions. These are great questions. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I hope I can even formulate this question correctly, but you think about addiction, I guess it's the physical withdrawal you see with something like heroin or alcohol, but then of course there's also things like gambling where you don't have that, which I guess in some ways is more similar maybe to social media addiction. And I was just curious, is there something that really specifically sets social media kind of based addictions apart from things like gambling? And what, in terms of the therapy and other tools which have been learned for other types of addiction, how do they translate to social media, or is there something maybe different needed versus what's been learned in terms of other approaches to other types of addictions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Not really. Addiction, like I said, is a big umbrella that can encompass a lot of different things. But what we want to look at, what we're usually looking at, is what your relationship is towards that addiction, as well as speed bumps in regards to, if I want to make a change, how can I make it easier on myself to make this change? We do see I have seen a little bit of physical changes when somebody has, there's these things now that you can buy where they will lock your phone into a box and you cannot get it out for a certain amount of time. You put a timer up and it's in there and you cannot get it out. And I've seen people use that and the kiddo is always going to their pocket, or they're doing something else with their hands. There is a physical aspect of this that we do see when it comes to it. But when it comes to treatment, it's a lot, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, is the same as if we were treating other types of addictions, because the wiring is similar. It's just the intensity and the not symptoms, it's the, comparing to drug addiction where it's physically hurting your body versus something that's maybe more mentally hurting your body, some physical. It's this spectrum there. But yeah, great question.
I have two teens, 16 and 18, who both have been on social media, and we were concerned and trying to do our best, but unfortunately with added more information with time, we're regretful. Yeah. So one of my questions is, also another side note is they say, we know all of this, Mom, we're aware of this, right. That's not affecting me. Right. I think it's kind of like it's affecting other people, not seeing the impact on themselves as much. But I think it is impacting them. And my question is, you mentioned that one of the impacts of social media on teens is they learn to outsource their worth to others. And that's something I've had to deal with and work through. I know we all probably do. For this specific problem with social media, what are maybe therapeutic modalities or techniques they could learn to reclaim their self-worth? Yeah. Other than just saying no more to social media.
Right. You have to add something if you're taking something away. Absolutely. What I have seen in my practice that we've used, and I'm going to forget the exact name of it, but there's the big book of self-esteem. There's DBT, there's things that you can write down, and I can't think of the name right now, but we have used that and we go to it quite a bit where we remind them of the positive things about them that they see within themselves. Because that's the thing. I mean, it's always wonderful to get a compliment and to get a like or something like that, but we don't want to base everything on that. It should come from internally. What do I like about myself? What am I good at? What sets me apart and is special and is unique? And that's just a consistent practice that I think we always all have to have, especially in young kids. But there's some great, if you Google self-esteem, dialectic behavioral therapy, or DBT, there's some great books out there that you can, I always like writing things out. It's a book that has like worksheets in there, and then you can revisit it throughout, whenever you're feeling a little down. That's what I've done, and I've also used in my practice. So yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Michael, for doing this. It's very topical. My 15-month-old granddaughter loves my phone.
Yeah.
She likes me, but she loves my phone. And when she goes to daycare, she gets every little toy phone there, and she hoards them. So I got this little game for little, toddlers to play. She can't play it very well, but she tries over. Is this a gateway drug? And I feel a little guilty. I don't want her mom to know that she's got my phone, So, hope she's not listening. So, am I giving my granddaughter a gateway drug into very bad experiences later? And what are little games on the phone? Or should we be mindful of taking care of those too?
No, I think it is not. I think what we have to, in this day and age, it's just going to be a part of our lives now from here on out. So it's that level of engagement. And, a big saying in therapy and especially in addiction is the opposite of addiction is connection a lot of the time. So it's that if you're connecting over a game, that's not the same as finding your self-worth or, having these sort of comparison type things that we see that are negatively affecting our kiddos and ourselves. So no, you're safe. I would say continue. And just remember that connection is a big deal between it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It seems like one of the big drivers, one of the big problems with social media is the fact that it's being driven by surveillance capitalism. The big thought that comes to mind is, well, it seems like there would be the political will in this country, both on the left and the right, to have an organization, say, like the Corporation for Public Broadcasting or something similar to that, creating a social media platform that's completely non-commercial, that we can actually have control over what the algorithms are, because social media, as it's designed right now, is operating how it's supposed to. It's designed to suck all our time away and keep our eyeballs on the screens. Yeah. And it's operating exactly as expected. If we can take away that profit motive, it would seem like it seems like it would be a huge help. That could be stage one. Stage two could perhaps be banning any surveillance capitalist media for anyone who's not old enough to get an ID.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It is. They are working they have a lot of power, and it's hard to pull that away or find a balance. I will say the optimistic side of me sees that 91-3 on the COSA Act as something that seemed a bit bipartisan, especially in this day and age. So I do think that we're hopefully trending in the right direction, but you are right. We have a long way to go. Yeah.
Thank you for presenting on this topic and for your work. I just wanted to quickly share, I read The Anxious Generation, and it kind of it's amazing, and it also is frightening as a parent. But I will say that it has a lot of good guidelines in it about things you can do. And so I think, and they have a website too. Yeah. So I would say anybody who's interested, check out their website.
Yeah, it's a great book.
I just wanted to know if there are education programs in schools for social media.
Not that I am aware of. I'm just thinking of I know for my kids, they have to use social media. They use YouTube for part of their classes, and they're given laptops. And we were just talking a little bit that they're starting to talk about in certain schools banning cell phones in classes or keeping them in their backpacks and things like that. So I think there is some discussion about it, but I don't know. Are you asking like if there's a class about being safe online?
Well, I remember as a kid in the 70s, we had, classes on drugs.
Sure.
And that really sticks out to me, but I just wonder, since this is like a drug, is there any equivalent for social media?
Like I said, this is the Surgeon General's warning came out last year, so it's still pretty new. But you're right. I mean, if we're putting that on packages of cigarettes, then it could be possibly leading to a point where we want to educate our teens and kids and ourselves on how to be safe. So I think that will be coming, and I think we're starting to see a little bits of it starting to come up now. But yeah, it's a good question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's going to be it for questions. I appreciate how engaged in real time this audience has been. Thank you once again to Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And before we invite you all to join us for coffee and conversation in Elliott Hall, I have a few announcements. Summer Forum will continue to meet live and on Zoom at 10 a.m. for the next 2 Sundays through August 18th. The complete schedule is available on our website, which is a healthy website. Next week, our topic and speaker will be Salt Lake City's West Side, Diversity is Our Strength, by Senator Luz Robles Escamilla. We hope you can join us. This week and next week, August 11th, there will be a summer sundown service. Come for the potluck at 5:30 and join for worship at 6:15. Reverend Monica is leading worship, and there will be music provided by Jim Thornburg on guitar. The following adult RE classes are being offered. My Octopus Teacher, which is a film discussion about this film on Thursday, August 15th, and discussion about a book, God, Human, Animal, Machine, on Thursday, August 22nd. The full description about these classes is available on our website, and sign-ups are also available there. There are many other things going on during the summer. Circle suppers, Women's Circle, 30s and 40s and Thriving, the Environmental Ministry Book Discussion Group, and their table out there where you can find all about environmental ministry. Camping trip, August 16th through 18th. Sign-ups would be online. Please consult the Torch for details. Thank you, everyone.